Hello, we will be looking at pages 1 through 7 and chapters 4 through 7 this week. The first several pages of this book provide an overview of the principles of successful grant seeking. Too often, organizations decide they want a grant to fund a project or initiative and jump right into the grant writing process. This often does not lead to a successful grant. Following the principles outlined in this introduction can help individuals and organizations be more effective at receiving grants. First, you must plan. The planning stages of the grant writing process are often overlooked, but are essential. We will discuss the planning process in more detail next week. But second, grants are not the answer. Organizations need to have comprehensive funding strategy, and grants should just be one part of it. Also, grant makers want to fund healthy organizations that are viable and sustainable. They don't want to be your only source of support. It's also important to remember that the grant process takes time, so if you have an emergency or urgent need, the grant maker may not be able to accommodate your request. You should plan ahead and develop a funding strategy for the next 1 to 2 years. Although there are many grants available, there is a great deal of competition. The internet provides information about grants to great numbers of people, and more organizations are applying for grants for costs that used to be covered by other sources. Grant makers are also looking for collaboration, so it is important to find partner agencies to work with. Since grants are not the answer, an organization needs to have an exit strategy for when the grant expires. Even if you write an outstanding proposal, you may not get funded, which is why you need to have a more sophisticated funding strategy. It is important to know the funder and understand the distinctions between the funders, which we will discuss further in Chapter 4. Also, you need to be aware of the larger environment. What is being funded right now? Where is the greatest need? Who are the major players? Do this homework to understand where you fit into the big picture. Be aware of the changes that occur in the funding world. Know who has the money to give, what they are funding, and how they are funding projects. Lastly, you will want to build a team. Grant writing is complex and difficult for a single individual. Use the expertise of others at your organization to help you in the grant writing process. They can help with research, collaboration, writing, and editing. Make sure you review the terminology and key terms on page 7, as these terms are used throughout the book. There are two major types of funding: public and private. Public refers to government funding organizations, such as at the federal level, state level, or city or local level, and private funding refers to foundations, corporations, and other organizations. The federal government is the largest grant maker in the world, but their process is also long, complicated, and time-consuming. State and local governments provide funding through a variety of means, including pass-through or flow-through monies. These monies are given to the state, and then the state distributes to organizations within the state that can meet the need. State and local funders also give money through contracts. An organization would receive a contract to provide a good or service for the state. All federal grants are accessible on the www.grants.gov website. They also distribute this information via email, social media, and other outlets. Individuals who work with the federal grant programs should be accessible, as they are paid by tax dollars to assist grant seekers. The grant opportunities reflect the federal government priorities, which may be due to recent disasters, new research, or interests of the party in power. The funding decisions may be made by employees of the different federal departments or outside reviewers. Sometimes there's a panel of volunteer peer reviewers who have expertise in the area who make the funding decision. For example, the Upward Bound grant that I worked on was through the Department of Education, and they used a panel of 3 peer reviewers, many of whom were retired Upward Bound directors, who assigned points to the grant proposal. 3 grades were averaged, and those with the highest scores were funded. The criteria is usually clearly articulated and explicit due to needing a transparent review process. Amounts from federal grants are usually larger than any other source. In 2009, $744 billion were awarded in federal grants. Lastly, federal grants require high accountability and require detailed reports to show that you're meeting outcomes. Otherwise, grantees can lose their funding. Foundations are one of the private funding sources. Foundations are legal entities that are required to give away a certain percentage of their interest annually. They can determine their areas of interest in which they want to give funds. Private foundations are endowed by a single source, often a family member. Public foundations, on the other hand, raise their money from the public in order to provide funds to community projects. Foundations that are established are often easy to access and get questions answered. whereas some small family foundations don't want to be contacted and therefore do not publish their contact information. The priorities from the foundations are set by individuals who donate funds. Usually they share their priorities or areas of interest on their website or in their materials. Decision makers are often the trustees of the foundation, family members, or the board. Community foundations may have representatives from the community to help make the decisions. The grant amounts from foundations can range from hundreds of dollars to millions of dollars. Private foundations must give a minimum of 5% of their annual asset value. The reporting is often not as stringent as for government funders, but they still want to hold the grantee accountable and may ask for receipts and reports. Each foundation establishes their own eligibility requirements. IRS rules do forbid foundations from giving to for-profit organizations, however. Some of the major developments in foundation giving is the amount of foundations and the amount of money being awarded. Giving circles have also emerged, which is where individuals pool their money together for a common cause in order to make a bigger impact. An example of this is the website GoFundMe and other similar websites. Corporations are another type of private funders. Corporations have a number of different ways in which they grant funds. A corporate foundation, they can do it through a corporate foundation, a corporate giving program, in-kind contributions, employee giving groups, or employee matching. Corporate giving programs are popular because they do not need to publicly disclose their grant-making decisions, and it allows for more flexibility. When putting together your budget for a potential grant, consider how corporations could provide an in-kind contribution as well. This is often easier to receive than a cash grant. A personal example of this is when I've asked tax preparers or accountants to provide their services for free for low-income families as part of our educational program. Corporations provide funding that is aligned with their marketing and public relations goals, financial goals, and human resource goals. If you're going to look to a corporation for funding, make sure you understand their goals in these areas. The decision makers in corporations may be managers, a panel of employees, or administrators. Before funding a grant, corporations may need to consult with their risk management team, government relations, union leaders, and key stockholders and management to make sure there are no issues that may put the corporation at risk. The amount of grants from corporations range from thousands of dollars to hundreds of thousands of dollars. In return, corporations usually want exposure, such as logo on clothing, materials, or signs. The accountability guidelines may be less than government grants, but the corporations still want to make sure the project fits with their overall goals. Grant seekers should consider how this project is mutually beneficial to the corporation as well. There are a number of organizations that provide funding opportunities. It is important to think about what organizations are in your community that may be interested in your project, from service organizations to trade associations to fraternities or hobby groups. Organizational funders may be easy to locate, but others may not publicize their funding opportunities, or you may need to be a member of the organization to request funds. You should see if anyone on your grant writing team belongs to any of these organizations and see if they can champion your cause. The priorities depend on each organization and their constituency. The decision makers in organizations are often volunteers, and the amount in grant dollars provided varies a great deal, from small grants of $100 to large grants. It may be best to start with these organizations when looking for funding, since they are smaller, less competitive, and may be easier to obtain. There are many different types of grants made, both by public and private funders. First, you should decide what type of funding you are looking for. There is startups and seed money to launch a new project, operating funds for costs of a project like rent and salaries. Pilot grants are used to demonstrate the effectiveness of a new model or approach. Project or program grants are funded specifically for a certain project. It's a shorter or more defined project, or a program which has longer duration. Challenge or matching grants are when a funder will provide funds for the organization after the organization has raised a certain amount of money, or they agree to match a certain amount of money that is raised. Capital funds are for buildings or major equipment. Capacity building or technical assistance grants provides funds in order to help an organization develop skills in a certain area, such as strategic planning. Leadership development or develop technology to help their project, like database management, fellowships or scholarships. Fellowships or scholarships are funds that can be given to students. An endowment is a fund that is restricted and the interest can be used for operating costs. Finally, program-related investments are low-interest loans, and loan guarantees are when a grant maker helps an organization get a loan, which they couldn't get on their own. There are different types of agreements from funders. First, funders may use a contract, or via request for proposal, which I'll refer to as an RFP throughout the course. The contract already outlines exactly what the organization will do and how much money it will receive. Grants are awarded for a project that is initiated by the grant seeker. And lastly, there can be a sponsored project, which is a specific program that is funded by an outside source. An RFP, or a request for proposal, may be solicited or unsolicited. Unsolicited proposals are when a grant seeker submits a proposal that was not asked for by the funder. Solicited proposals are completed by the grant seeker in response to a specific request from the funder. Funders issue an RFP to announce their priorities and elicit proposals. You can find these RFPs out for government RFPs. Those can be accessed and found on the grants.gov website. An RFP may have its own unique information, but most RFPs include the following information: the purpose, the amount of funding available, instructions for how to complete the proposal, instructions on how to show capability, technical details and how to submit the grant, legal issues, instructions on how to complete the budget, and a list of required forms. RFPs come from government agencies are often long and can be confusing, up to 100 pages. Therefore, it is important to read them carefully and make sure you follow all of the guidelines. Before responding to the RFP, you should decide if your organization is a good fit. You should consider if the RFP is relevant to your organization's mission, if you meet the eligibility requirements, if it is feasible for your organization to carry out the grant, if the RFP is flexible enough for your organization to express their interest and creativity, and if the organization is flexible enough to manage the project. You should also think about if your organization has the capability to meet the requirements of the RFP, including the financial and human resources that are required to commit to the grant writing process. Lastly, you should think about how competitive your organization will be. I have a personal example of this. There was a great federal grant opportunity that was issued this past summer, and our organization wanted to apply, but we only had 30 days and we didn't have the human resources needed to put together a writing team. Plus, the grant wasn't as flexible as we would have liked. It didn't allow us to do some of the things we wanted to do. Therefore, we decided not to apply. When looking for a suitable funding match, you first must know your organization, which we'll learn more about next week when we discuss Chapter 1. Second, you need to know where to look for funding opportunities. First, start with your constituents and see if they have ideas or connections. Next, look at prior funders. They want you to be successful and may have ideas. Vendors you work with may also have connections. You can look at peer organizations and see who they have received funding from. This is usually published in their annual report or on their website. Your elected officials may have information on funding opportunities and that they are interested in helping you bring more money to their area. They are interested in bringing more money to their area. There are a number of online resources you can use to find grant opportunities as well. This book's website provides a link to many of those resources. That link is gettingfundedbook.com, and your local library may have opportunities as well. Before approaching a funder, research them thoroughly. Look at their guidelines, which are usually posted on their website, their annual report, which you can also usually find on their website, and their IRS Form 990. You can view these if it's not on their website through going through guidestar.com online. Look through their website to understand their mission, goals, and values, and review their publications. Lastly, you may want to try to have a conversation with potential funders, unless they specifically say they do not want you to reach out. To determine if a funder is a good match, look for common ground. Do you have a shared mission, a shared constituency, shared culture, shared image, shared market, or a shared opportunity? Organizations and corporations who have experienced negative attention may be willing to partner in order to help change its reputation in the community, so be aware of these opportunities. The last chapter talks about the importance of making a good first impression and steps to help foster a positive relationship with funders. First, do your homework. Don't ask questions that are answered on the website and don't waste their time. Know how they want to be approached and follow those requests. For example, if they don't want phone calls, don't call them. Initiate the relationship unless they specifically state otherwise. Don't let the proposal be the first time the organization has heard from you. You want to send information they request, but don't send information they don't ask for.